Sometimes it's like I'm watching myself.
Like I'm outside.
Ka hoi hoi ngā reo. E taurona ana.
The challenges I face.
The decisions I make.
Should I?
Me pērā.
I want to be.
They want me to be.
I pretend to be.
I pretend to be.
But if I listen harder,
Ka rongo.
I hear myself.
navigating the DMs.
The conversations with my kaiako.
Te tautoko mai a taku whānau.
It's connected.
And I can take a breath.
And then I'm inside.
Standing, feet firm on the ground.
Me he pou.
Strong.
Proud.
Grounded.
He mahoi.
From here I can go anywhere.
Find my own path.
Toku tuakiritanga.
Whatever comes,
I know myself.
I am
ready.
Tēnā tātou katoa, nau mai, haere mai, nau mai, hoki mai. Welcome to you all on this Thursday afternoon for what is the second part of our anxiety-focused webinars here through Tūturu. For today's one, linking in with what we covered last week with our colleague, our Tūturu whānau, Scott Turnbull, with his deep dive into anxiety, where there was the exploration of anxiety, including what it is, its impacts, some of the signs and symptoms that typically present young people, exploration of similarities and differences between generalized and social anxiety, and how much each may impact young people's behavior, thoughts and physical sensations, as well as looking further into those common coping strategies, briefly touching on social media and wrapping up around what you can do to help someone experiencing anxiety. If you haven't managed to watch those, I encourage you to head to tuturu.org.nz under Tūturu in Action to engage with our vaping content, our anxiety content, as well as our first two-part vaping webinars held a few months back. With me today, we'll be building off of Scott's presentation with the wider Tūturu team here at the New Zealand Drug Foundation with my colleagues, Dr. Annabel Prescott, our Learning and Development Director here, as well as Ben Birks Ang, Deputy Executive Director, and myself, Tumokai Morgan, National Tūturu Operations Manager, as we take you through strategies and plans for helping young people deal with anxiety and other issues at school, as well as introducing you to simple, effective and evidence-based interventions that can support student well-being. There will be an opportunity to discuss issues raised in this webinar at the end of the session, and I encourage you all to drop questions in the comments as we go through this, and we'd also love to hear where you're tuning in from as well. So a bit of an overview of Tūturu here. Tūturu, what is it? National kaupapa supporting schools in developing robust and evidence-based approaches to wellbeing, firmly grounded in our space here in Aotearoa, really highlighting the ecosystem that schools are in relation to learning and support, and how they can really help all students achieve and get support quickly and easily. It's an approach complemented by resources and guides that have been developed and trialled by New Zealand schools and health services, as well as being supported by an independent evaluation by the New Zealand Council for Educational Research that found that Tūturu has changed the focus from punitive to pastoral. Schools are a microcosm of the community. Apologies, whānau, tech glitch on my end. Passing over to Annabel to run us through the landscape in relation to school environment. Aroha mai.
Awesome, thanks too. I thought it'd be really interesting just to position our kōrero within the context of a wider youth health discussion. So what we do know is that youth health trends have changed over the last decade, and we've had some significant wins in regards to substance use, in regards to driving behaviour, in regards to driving and drinking by young people. But one of the shifts that has been less good or of higher concern is around young people reporting increased levels of mental health distress. So what I've done is I'm presenting to you some Youth 19 data. One of the aspects when we're thinking about why has mental health worsened in our youth population, we do know that this is consistent with what we see in many developed nations. There are a number of hypotheses for this. Some of this relates to our increased knowledge and increased literacy around adverse childhood experiences, the role of poverty, intergenerational trauma, in regards to the New Zealand context, experiences of racism or structural racism and colonisation, shifts in parental behaviour, social media. What's important to highlight here is it's not one of these as the main driver, that it's a cluster of these factors that we think are contributing to increased mental health distress in our young people. One of the aspects that I did want to kind of zero in on for the next couple of slides is looking at the role of poverty in relation to mental health distress. And what I'd like to do is draw your attention in particular to significant depressive symptoms slide, where what we can see is we can see a significant difference in young people who come from neighbourhoods that experience low levels of deprivation in comparison to neighbourhoods that experience high levels of deprivation. And this is really consistent and becomes more marked when we get into more serious or acute expressions of mental health distress, such as a similar trend is present in the attempted suicide columns. What is also of concern is that young people are expressing relatively high and consistent levels of struggling to access help when they are experiencing distress, which I guess is further support for why presentations and looking at the school environment is really important. I know that the language around school deciles has changed, but this data precedes when that language has changed. And again, we do see a similar trend. Of note on this slide is it's the opposite. So a high decile school is often reflective of higher levels of income or lower levels of deprivation. So we'll see the same trend being communicated to you in a different way. So low decile schools are reporting higher levels of mental health distress with their young people. And you can see that if I point you again to significant depressive symptoms, we can see that our schools at the lower decile end experience higher levels of mental health distress in their young people. Thank you. What I like, one of the values of Tūturu and definitely of a youth health approach is looking at what are the strengths and what are the levers that we can draw on that will make a difference. All of these on this table are based in what the evidence tells us. And what I'd like to zone in on and what the structure of our presentation will take you through today is really focused on the school setting. We will shortly be talking about school climate and factors like that teachers care, that they feel like teachers are fair, that the school is supportive, that teachers have high expectations of their students, that young people have access to activities such as sports, arts, groups that offer a sense of belonging, and that any barriers that exist in terms of accessing these are actively addressed within school policies and procedures. There's an opportunity to experience different norms and ways of being, because we know that identity formation is a key developmental task during the adolescent time period, and also that young people have easy access to health services, and an opportunity within the health curriculum to develop their health literacies. A number of these factors are what we will be running through today. So thank you. And I shall hand back to Tu.
Kia ora, aroha mai people. My connection is a little glitchy, but we will get through this. As we're looking at this one's really taking that whole range of adolescent behaviours into account and really honing in on avoiding pushing those conversations underground or inadvertently steering people to riskier or more harmful things. Regardless of the health topic, every young person will make decisions about their well-being. Many young people have some experiences that don't cause those long-term impacts. Some young people experience issues that need a small amount of support to resolve, and a few young people will experience significant challenges and need professional support. And how adults respond can have a greater impact on a young person's life trajectory. Then that's a really interesting point around the response more so than the situation or the context that happens with that one. As you know, schools can be ecosystems of learning support that help students achieve and get support quickly and easily. And this really means aligning those environmental factors in the school, such as policies and practices that help every student feel like they belong and that their well-being is important and valued. How learning opportunities are created for those students to understand mental health and well-being, the pastoral care, those support processes in school, as well as those school counsellors and the health response. And with this inverted triangle we got here, really looking at at a school level, you've got all students engaging in that health education component, and then on that lower end where the few students are engaging with that health service component. And as we know, the grey zone that can exist in between those two. So the foundation, a positive school environment where students feel like they belong and that their well-being is important. An explicit focus on school climate and student connectedness may be equally, if not more effective in addressing health and problem behaviours than specific single issue education packages. Really honing in on that whole school approach to mental health and the value of that explicit approach to it regarding student connectedness and school climate. And as we know, that these whole school approaches where we're highlighting those themes on a regular and consistent basis, proving to be more effective than single sessions and packages. We do know they have value, but it's really that sustainable, connected sense of support and well-being that underpins all of that. Awesome. Engaging and re-engaging young people in supportive environments and positive activities. This is really honing in on the strength-based youth development approach and the importance of youth workers in schools as levers to make this happen. As it says, this can even be helpful for young people who do not want to make changes. It's really about valuing them in their moment and allowing that space for maybe the grey to be worked through and supporting them through into the next stage. We know among individuals affected by adverse childhood experiences, team sport, participation in young people associated with better adult mental health. I feel like that's a message that is relatable here, especially in Aotearoa with our strong sports culture there. And I think with this one, in regard to those adverse childhood events, really what that's honing in on is that those events, significant events where something tragic or traumas occurred in a young person's life, and how that can increase the likelihood or the probability of risk later on. And honing into that anxiety piece, it's really the likelihood that increased probability of anxiety-related challenges, behaviours, and issues. And as we know too, the evidence that backs up youth development as a strength-based approach that can help young people navigate this space. And flowing on to our next bit, we'll bring Annabel back into, back in to explore the learning program component. Kia ora, Ben.
Awesome, thanks Tu. So this next part, we've heard about the foundations of a positive school climate where every student feels like they are welcome, that they belong, and that their well-being is important. Something that's really crucial to help issues be identified early and for students to feel comfortable accessing support, talking about it in their school environment. And I've worked in schools where the opposite has been there, where students have felt like it is inappropriate for them to talk about well-being concerns. And usually it means that health concerns go under the radar for much longer and need a lot more concerted effort to be able to help it come out and to help students feel like they can be supported by the rest of the pastoral care team at school to explore that a little bit more. What we're focusing on here is the health competencies that start off helping a young person explore their situation and learn those core skills that they need to be able to live life in a modern world. The first thing to think about here is that we need to use language that fits where the young person is at. So I've got up here a model. This comes from jack.org over in Canada, which doesn't use diagnostic language in it or health topic language in it as well. So it focuses that a young person could feel healthy or they could be stressed. And often a lot of the time when they are feeling healthy or stressed, then self-care or social support can be what helps them there. There will be times that they feel like they're struggling or in crisis, and that's when kind of more of that professional support at different levels can be helpful. I think in terms of anxiety, we know that feeling anxious or nervous is really, really common. It's a natural human experience that most people face. Having a diagnosable anxiety disorder or living with anxiety is less common. And so if young people are missing out on some of these opportunities to be able to identify and name emotions, building some of their core emotional literacy first, and just a note on that, that's a crucial competency for future health interventions, like being able to engage with cognitive behavioral therapy and stuff like that, which is really effective for anxiety. Then it means that they could be in situations where they end up becoming more distressed rather than less. So I'm going to show an example of this. If there's a young person who doesn't know much about their emotions, they haven't learned about stress, they haven't learned about feeling anxious or low mood, or the concept of struggling, but they hear anxiety, which is a diagnostic term, or living with anxiety, having an anxiety disorder, they become much more familiar with that as a concept. They get normal stress around test time or exam time, but instead of associating that with stress because they haven't learned or explored that or thought critically about that, they go to the term that they hear the most, which is anxiety. They Google anxiety, which comes up with a whole lot of stuff about anxiety disorder, and suddenly it raises their distress even more because they need to feel associated with that to justify the feelings that they have inside of them. And this is what we know, that diagnostic language can help people who are in that more extreme side of things because it gives them the words to be able to describe what they're already feeling. If somebody is at an earlier stage of that or lower levels of that continuum, diagnostic language can sometimes increase their distress because they have to elevate their experience to feel justified in feeling it. And this is where it fits here. So we know that I'm talking about those three kind of foundational parts of the pyramid below, that strategies or techniques, things like mindfulness and stuff like that are often spoken about when we talk about anxiety. And those of us who work in pastoral care are always looking out for new strategies or new techniques that we can teach. The crucial part of this is that students need to have experience of learning core health competencies, those things like being able to identify and name emotions, have opportunities to try it in different contexts. And that's what makes the ability to use their strategies or techniques much easier, because the strategies and techniques are essentially shortcuts to be able to remind them to practice those core competencies in that particular context. So here's some activities that a group of health teachers have pulled together to be able to help pull this into a health learning curriculum. So the first thing that we know here, regardless of the health topic, is that students need to learn about well-being and how to reflect on their well-being needs. And in terms of the health learning area, this sits really clearly in the managing self-key competency. There is an example activity that I've shown the front page on the right, and you can download this from tūturu.org.nz with all of the instructions for teachers and guidance about how to explore this. Building this competency can also be used as an identification of what learning needs a student may have. So it can be helpful to be able to shape that kind of learning program together as well. What this activity does is students learn the definitions for 3 different wellbeing frameworks. They learn what they mean, how to reflect on their wellbeing using each of the framework, and then they identify an area of wellbeing that they want to change with some health promoting actions that could help. The earlier that they do this, so if it's something that all Year 9 students have, then the easier it is to work with them later on in their secondary school years if issues arise. So the models that are covered in here, there's the 7 C's model, which if you haven't heard of it before, that covers competence, confidence, connection, character, contribution, coping, and control. Just a note on that one, the character one is a really good one to be able to introduce and socialize your school's values into this. What character are you hoping to build in these students, and how do they apply it and use that to reflect on their well-being? So that's quite an individual model. There's a more collective model of student well-being that is called PCAT. And this is where students look at the setting that's around young people or themselves to be able to reflect on their well-being, where they explore people who care about them, their positive contributions to their community, places that they feel like they belong, and positive activities that can help them to develop. And I'm sure that we're all very familiar with the 3rd wellbeing framework, Te Whare Tapawha, developed here in Aotearoa by Sir Mason Jury. There's also a second follow-up activity that could be done in a future in the next class that students do, which uses scenarios to help students explore using these frameworks and some critical thinking questions that are also aligning really nicely with restorative practice questions to explore a situation and come up with a support plan for another young person. Again, the more that they explore this as a core part of their health education early on, the easier it is that that these students can understand the situation, see it as a learning opportunity, and engage with the material that a pastoral care staff like a school counsellor or their dean might help them with later on when issues arise. Here is an example. So these are all editable PDFs as well. So if you're in one of these schools where you're looking at some online learning, some stuff that students can do independently to be able to reflect on some stuff, they can chuck that all into the PDF there. Another one that could be really good to build health competencies is, and done on a regular basis with classes, is being able to identify what health and social services are in the community, what they do, and when people could access them. And this helps to promote that help-seeking behavior and socialize and normalize that it's okay to seek support. It's okay to have conversations within a school environment. And this is where students would explore different health topics and who they could go to for support, and essentially create their own social services map. So it could be good to do that as a class activity with some different groups doing different types of activities. And those little icons that you'll see there, that helps the young people to be able to figure out if that service helps them to do a checkup. So young people can check if everything's going okay or if they should be worried, helps them to feel better when things aren't going well, help them to learn to feel more in control, learn how to make changes, or get support from people who have been in a similar situation. I'm going to hand over now. So those were the core kind of health competencies that are there as the ingredients for students. Now Annabel's going to take us through progressively what happens when students need support and what interventions could be in place within a school situation.
Awesome. Thanks heaps for that, Ben. I think one of the key threads that Tūturu and our colleagues here are trying to emphasise is the importance around creating multiple opportunities within your school environment for students to learn and develop their health competencies. And as they learn and develop their health competencies, and if they end up at the kind of bottom of the triangle, of the inverted triangle, then they will already have built some literacy and some understanding. And when we do this, what we know is that the health interventions and the work of the health professional or the school guidance counsellor does become more effective. So, and we have, if you've attended some of our previous webinars, we have talked about this in the past. And again, what we're trying to do is create multiple opportunities for learning to be developed within the school environment. We know that when we are building that basis and that wellbeing framework within a school environment, where students feel like, as Tu pointed to some research at the beginning of the presentation, we know that has a positive impact on students' wellbeing outcomes. One of the ways that we can do this is developing a culture within the school and a sense of confidence within teaching staff to be asking and facilitating questions around, are you okay, if they do notice that a student's attendance or that their grades are slipping. So when we are looking at, could we flick through some slides, please? And to the next one. Awesome. When we do have these conversations with students, one of the really important things that we do first is just a pause for ourselves, a prepare and thinking around ways that we can connect in. One of the things, particularly when we are looking at anxiety, is sometimes what I've seen happen is the young person is anxious, and then the person wanting to have the conversation is also a bit heightened and anxious themselves. So as the adult facilitating that conversation, we really just want to take that pause and remember to be non-judgmental, that our biggest intention of this conversation and message that we want to signal to the young person is that we care. We want to demonstrate compassion, genuineness, and optimism for the future. Facilitating these conversations, we would recommend that you approach it in a way that is curious in nature. So start as like, hey, I've noticed this is happening. What's going on? Or, what's up? Are you okay? Another aspect that a lot of us need retraining in, including myself, is our ability to listen. So again, thinking about how we pause and really hear how that young person is responding to us is a vital point when we are doing kind of a check-in or an are you okay conversation with young people. When we do these conversations, and if a number of school staff feel confident in the are you okay corridor, we know that young people experience that positively. And we also know that across the school staff, that the staff feel like that there's more spread across the student population of staff looking out for students. When this strategy isn't embedded within the school wellbeing framework, what tends to happen is a few of the staff will hold a lot of the pastoral care responses, and that can feel quite stressful and strained for those staff. So we do encourage a good spread of this. We also know that young people connect with different people. So the more people that are able to have these conversations, the better. Going kind of further into how to support students, for those students that need further support within the school environment, we have developed a support plan. Again, these are available on the Tūturu website, and these really look at how the wellbeing concern is affecting areas of their lives. We also then create the opportunity for young people to build their health literacy and their health competencies by creating an opportunity for them to be reflective as to how their well-being is being impacted, particularly from a relational perspective and into the school environment. what this does, and again, just linking back to health literacy and the health competencies, is if students have already developed some of these critical thinking skills, it makes these conversations feel easier. And also it ensures, if the wider scaffolding has been done within the school environment, it also, the students experience this as a safer approach because they know that the school values their wellbeing. So these are some of the ways that we can facilitate a critical reflection. So, and Ben signalled to a number of these things when he was talking about what we can do from a curriculum perspective. So again, looking at reflection, what are the values? How do the values link to school, to the school values? What's the impact of this wellbeing concern on yourself and others? And moving through into what needs to change, and what supports is it that you need for that change to happen. Thank you. So again, we want to be, if we think back to a few slides previously around how to facilitate that "are you okay" conversation, we are really wanting to have those values around being compassionate and curious when we plan what to do. One of the things I always like to mediate with any behavioural change piece that I'm facilitating with a young person is setting them up to experience success. So often when we try to change behaviours, we tend to look at going on a bit of a pendulum, and we tend to swing to the other extreme. What we know needs to happen is that we just need to take small steps, gain some success, and what that will allow is for momentum and motivation to build. So that's just a side note when we're thinking about planning on what to do and facilitating that conversation going forward. And obviously, again, like any behaviour change, no matter whether it's a young person or an adult, we always go through a review process. So what worked well? I need to lean forward. What has not gone well, or what is it that we need to tweak? You know, we at the moment, the catchphrases are how do we need to be agile or pivot this plan? So some of those aspects to help deepen the young person's learning around their behaviour change and build in that sense of, yes, they have made some changes, and that's amazing, and we want to celebrate that. And there no doubt will be aspects that haven't gone as well. So what is it that we can learn and review and build into the next kind of phase of their engagement? When young people experience anxious feelings, we thought that it would be really useful. So hopefully what you've noticed is we've started kind of at the macro environment of the school, looking at the curriculum, the frameworks or the settings within a school environment. We've pathwayed you through some of those environmental factors that we can consider within a school environment, including curriculum and pastoral care responses. And now we're really looking at what we can do when a young person is presenting in a more anxious state. So one of the pieces that I thought I'd talk you through is around our nervous system. I'm sure this is something that we're all really familiar with. The piece that I wanted to add on is that particularly with when we think about young people and young people coming into the classroom or peer groups, is that what we've seen happening is that young people and any group actually, whether it's a young person or an adult, is that a group starts to create its own nervous system. So if an area or a group is really hyped up, then that another person that enters into that environment will also become heightened. So one of the things we need to be cognizant of is around how we bring that down generally. So you probably, if a number of you are teachers in this webinar, then probably what you will have noticed is start of term 4, some of your seniors kind of would have been peaking quite a bit. So some of these strategies that we're going to talk you through apply both to a group and to a classroom setting, and can really help that when things are feeling a bit more heightened in the school environment, just to help calm that down. Awesome. So we did want to highlight here for you that there are different levels of emotional arousal. So at a level 1, where we call that no emotional arousal, somebody is likely to be quite disorientated, disassociated from actually what is going on, through to at number 10, where somebody is what I call hyped or heightened, extremely emotionally aroused. So we're often at a 10, we're in a fight or flight, and at a 1, we're probably in the freeze. Ideally, what we're trying to operate in and develop competency and literacy in for young people and for adults that haven't had the opportunity to learn these skills is around keeping us between a 4 and an 8. What we'll see in terms of a normal, I don't like that word, but for lack of a better word, a normal emotional regulation, there will be fluctuations between a 4 and an 8 throughout the course of the day and across the course of the week. What we're trying to prevent is big highs and big lows. And we'll go on to the next slide. Thank you. So look, we've all heard around breathingness. I've just made up a word. Breathing strategies and the impact that they have. So, and feel free to follow through these breathing exercises while I don't breathe and talk quickly. What we know about breathing and why it is such an effective strategy and why so many people are talking about it is because it is one of the key ways that we can regulate what's going on in our nervous system. So if we are heightened in our arousal, or if we are too low in our arousal, so at a 10 or a 1, focusing in on our breath allows the nervous system to rebalance, and it allows for some calm to enter into our nervous system. So it really is fundamental to helping keep our emotional regulation within that mid-range, which is where we're ideally wanting to operate. If we go through to the next slide, another great strategy to look at doing is progressive muscle relaxation. So this is where you might start with the hands, and I think particularly this is really useful if somebody is if their anxiety is presenting as aggression and they're heightened and they're being aggressive. So getting them to tense and squeeze their fists and focus on that, and then relaxing them down, talking through what is the difference that they feel and moving that sensation through the body while also facilitating in the tense everything up, and in the loosening, facilitating the deep breath and the breathing out. And that will help shift the emotional regulation or as I said in my example, the aggression presentation of anxiety. Thank you. Another one that I really do like, and it's grounded in a lot of evidence, is around our nervous system is directly linked to what our senses are. and we are constantly at a subconscious level checking if we are safe. If somebody is in particularly a heightened level of arousal, so if you think you're 8, 9, 10s, what we know is that their senses will be working in overdrive to try to regulate, to determine if they are currently safe. So what we need to be able to do is then utilize the senses to then create a sense of calm and groundedness. So this if somebody is heightened, we need to be quite overt with that. I always recommend that we use a person's name, because that again helps bring people into the present moment. So for example, if I just pick on Ben, and Ben was at a 9 or a 10, I would be saying to Ben right now, Ben, tell me please 2 things that you can see in the room that you're in. Thank you, Ben. I can see those. Ben, can you please tell me 2 things that you can hear? And I would go through that, each of the senses. I would then be asking Ben, can you take 2 deep breaths for me? If I need to go around the 5 senses again, I would then do that again. And I would say, Ben, can you tell me 3 things in this room that you can see? What can you touch, Ben, in this room? Doing that helps presence and ground people into the room. One of the things that I have done with a group of young people is develop a kite with them at the beginning of their school year. And in this kite, what we've done is we've developed or printed off different pictures that they can choose from. We've put in a sensory fidget. We've put in a little snap-lock bag, a lavender-scented piece of fabric. We've put in some mints, like lolly mints, not beef mints. That would be weird. And the hearing is something that can be facilitated without being in the kite. So this is something that is relatively straightforward to implement and really, as I said earlier, grounded in evidence. Thank you. What's our next slide? If you're the school counsellor, so this is again that for those few students that might need a health professional or therapeutic intervention. So I'll just quickly run you through what some of these could look like. One of the things that we do know is that a low mood, so young people that are, if we think back to the arousal slide, young people that are under 4 need a different approach than young people that are at 8 and above. So when we look at the low mood presentation, what we are wanting to really do is walk alongside at a pace that is slightly different from the pace that they are at, but not, we don't want to, hit it out of the ballpark. We want to match as much as we can, but we want to facilitate them to engage in activities, to connect with other people. Having a structure, creating a structure and a plan for your day is really helpful if this is the space that you're in, and facilitating some form of physical activity. When somebody is in the 8 or above, what we are wanting to do is really prioritize slowing things down for them, and the strategies we've just talked through support either a low or a heightened nervous system state. But anxious feelings, we want to slow people down. So how we are interacting needs to be slowed down as well. We're wanting to support these young people in some planning and some preparing. We're wanting to reduce their emotional overwhelm. And a key part of that is around us being calm. And we want to help develop strategies that can interrupt any unhelpful thought patterns, which shortly we'll talk a little bit around CBT. Thank you. So more of a nod to a screening tool that you can follow up on is the Strengths and Difficulties Questionnaires or screening tool. This explores 5 different areas and gives a total score for the young person around areas that they are particularly struggling in. Where I think this tool is particularly useful within a therapeutic engagement is looking at doing it at the beginning, at a mid, and then at a kind of end of intervention plan. It allows the young person to get some great feedback around how their difficulties or challenges are changing as they address their wellbeing concern, because it is really easy to forget some of these things or some of the outcomes because they become yesterday's news. So this is a nice way to capture it and to facilitate that conversation around, hey, well, look, this has changed quite a lot. Your friendship group has changed. You're talking about less drama. And give them some feedback and some encouragement along the way. We have also talked around, or another really effective model is looking at CBT when we are looking at particularly anxiety presentations. Now, what makes any health intervention, and particularly CBT, more effective? CBT is looking at how feelings, thoughts, and actions are interconnected. A student, if they have got those health competencies as their kind of prior learning, then what this allows to happen is when we do introduce some critical thinking around reflecting on their emotions within a CBT framework, it allows that to come a lot easier to the student. It allows for the therapeutic engagement to become a lot easier and more effective because those health competencies have been developed within the curriculum space. And there is a lot of workshops available on CBT, but we just wanted to give a nod to this modality as a way of effectively working with young people. And as we've said before, there's a range of professional development available on our website that does look at supporting broader wellbeing outcomes for young people that we'd love for you to access, and just shout out if you've got any questions through our admin email. And I think now we are into some question time. So if anyone's got any questions, I think Tumokai and Ben are going to join me, and we'd super love to hear if you've got any questions about what we've shared today.
Awesome. Kia ora, Annabel and Ben, for running through that. I was thinking as going through the importance and the reinforcing around school connectedness and those environs that help promote this, the each individual young person feeling like they are valued, and that their well-being is important, those youth development approaches, and those people being key levers around engaging and re-engaging with positive activities, that sport example, and how that can link into improved mental health as an adult, the importance of the learning program that's focused on those health competencies around strategies that they can use in the different contexts and the different frameworks for support, and also even what that looks like outside of the school boundaries, out in the wider community, building those support pathways that start early. And we delved into a bit of those resource support examples with the support plans, delved through a bit of those strategies on the individual. Definitely the breathing. I think that's a strat that I feel like is easy to use, not just with our young people, but also in our own lives. I do remember Scott mentioning, even before delving into some of his prezi, around taking a breath, taking stock, and then moving forward into the next bit to ground him. overview of that PLD, professional development and resources, and once again, always emphasizing this expectation that teachers are having to solve the world's problems in a limited time, and in some cases almost non-existent time there. So just wanted to acknowledge our teachers who have a very big plate to deal with as we go through there. A few questions as we're going through. A couple that I feel would be beneficial to our wider audience today is around how much of our health program should we put into learning about anxiety and mental health. And I'm thinking, just to give Annabel a bit of a break after the awesome quarter, I want to throw that over to Ben. So Ben, what do you reckon?
Yeah, I think that's a really great question. And part of the change of how health learning is being taught in New Zealand as well. So we're used to kind of topics driving the health curriculum and what people learn that cover kind of like, here's the knowledge you learn, here's a specific one. Whereas a lot of our health learning area in the New Zealand curriculum is focused on those competencies. And I think there's the ability for those competencies, those same core competencies to be taught, for teachers to reflect on where students' learning needs are and pull in a learning program that matches their real life context. So I think the answer to this question is based around where the students' learning needs are in terms of that competency development. And I'm meaning those competencies of how to identify what well-being is, how to identify what their emotions are, how to identify what other people's emotions are, which, side note, is quite a difficult task sometimes for teenagers and something that they need to learn as well. And how to communicate with each other around that. The other part where this can be really helpful to come into this is the health consultation that you do with your school community every 2 years. That's part of a formal process where you present your health learning program, and that it teaches critical thinking about well-being and teaches those competencies, and it provides a forum for you to see what those characteristics or those real life contexts are within the community, so that you can adjust the context that you use within the classroom to be able to account for what students are likely to be experiencing outside of school. That helps them to relate to those to the learning context, relate to the competencies that you're teaching, and giving them the ability to immediately practice those in multiple settings outside of there. So I think a roundabout way of saying, if you are in a community where anxiety and mental health is one of the forefront issues that students are thinking about, that they're experiencing from their whānau at home, that they're experiencing outside of there, and we know that this is very present in the media. We know that young people have had quite a disrupted school experience over the past couple of years, so their rates of anxiety and mental health, or exploration of that, is quite high. Then we may choose to have a larger component of the program using anxiety and mental health as a learning context for those competencies. That may change over time, and just make sure that you don't have your whole health learning program focusing on one particular topic or issue, being really, really niche into it, because students may understand how to use those competencies, particularly for one area, and miss out on some of those other things. And you as a teacher then don't necessarily get that opportunity to explore what students' learning needs are, what they might be experiencing that's separate from the discussion topic, where they could really need those crucial health competencies taught.
No, that's interesting. I was thinking back to the examples around school connectedness, but it's almost bigger than that in terms of connectedness with the internal class content, connecting with the environment, connecting with the stuff outside of the school, connecting with those points of interaction where the community can actively contribute into the school there. No, really interesting, thinking that it's not just that individual connectedness as a young person, but the learning context and the flow and link. And really interesting there, Ben. Annabel, any further comments on that? Or Ben did a lovely comprehensive response there.
Yeah, thanks, Ben. I think the thing that I would add is coming back to the environmental factors within a school. I was looking at some data recently that said 60% of students wanted to do activities but didn't know how. So I know often at schools in term 1, there's a big drive around extracurricular activities, and there's a couple of opportunities to sign up, and then that's sometimes it for the year. What we do know is at the beginning of the year, often students, they're an information overload. So I was really surprised by that high level of 60% of students wanting to do activities but didn't know how. So I would really encourage you to look at what it is like for your student population, and if there are barriers, or even though you feel like you put it in every morning announcement, somehow the message isn't getting through to some students, look at how we can engage young people in activities that are available to them, because we do know that is one of the leading most effective ways in terms of positive youth health outcomes is the activity space.
You can really see the relevance there, with the essentially on the doorstep of the summer holidays and this big chunk of time where event, is trying to figure out what we can utilize to keep our young people engaged, or not, if that's what they choose not to do. They're awesome. Kia ora to you both. All right, moving on to our next question, which I think ties in nicely with that, is that what do we do in the moment if someone looks like they are extremely anxious and panicking? And I'll keep that same rhythm. I'll throw it over to you, Ben, first.
Yeah, that's a really good question, and I'm remembering my time in the classroom and also managing day programs and residential programs for young people where it came up a lot. I think the thing for us to keep in mind is that anxiety rears its head in different ways, like Annabel was saying. So when people feel that emotional overwhelm and their threshold is kind of reached and broached, all of that opportunity for critical thinking has gone. And some young people may express that through an aggressive type response, through wanting to fight. They can't think things through, and that's their way of resolving that emotional overwhelm. Others will freeze and dissociate and won't be able to think or function, and others might try to escape the situation, be a class clown to diffuse the tension, run away, run out the door, that kind of stuff. And so there are those moments that we might be able to spot when actually it's anxiety underneath, although the presenting behavior looks a little bit different. The panicking response is something really important as well, where people might have some of that kind of fast-paced breathing, their brain is shutting down, they're unable to hear some of the stuff. If you think back to kind of those of you who are parents in the call, toddlers and stuff like that as well, that kind of overwhelm, panic response sometimes can be really, really strong. And I think the framework to remember at this times is to regulate, helping them to regulate the emotion, is the first step, whether it's kind of removing them from the environment. And I used to do this quite a bit with young people, particularly if they were getting more aggressive and couldn't contain their emotions, taking them somewhere where there wasn't an audience so that they can calm down, maybe doing some of their breathing exercises, maybe doing the stuff that Annabel was saying around the 5 senses. Regulating for them and helping them to regulate at a time where they can't is really important as a first step. Relating is the next one, being able to understand and hear what's going on for them, empathizing, while also then moving into the next stage of reasoning as their kind of prefrontal cortex starts coming back into play, going, what were you doing there? How would that impact on other people? How is that appropriate or not appropriate? Mostly for the aggressive side of things, the panicking can have different kinds of reasoning. So that framework, regulate, relate, reason, I think is the important one to remember.
And again, I'll just add on to that. We, as the person facilitating that, need to be the calm, right? Because if we come in going, just calm down, you've got to do this, we're actually in a heightened state. And what happens is all the non-verbal communication, or what's called body languages, start to communicate. So again, coming back to our breathing, taking that breath and facilitating that kōrero that Ben just talked you through, using the strategies that we've talked about in this webinar, are going to be a great platform for supporting a young person to calm down.
No, so important around the the steps that need to take place if we want that learning journey to start up again, and that they can benefit each other, and the balance between your energy, their energy. Yeah, lots to think about. I am mindful of our time, so I think that's good for us to wrap up now. Want to acknowledge and thank you to everyone who's tuning in this afternoon for this second of our two-part anxiety-focused webinars here via Tūturu. Thank you to my colleagues, Dr. Annabel, Prescott, and Ben Birks Ang, for your expertise as we navigate the space at a very timely. It's very timely in terms of where we're at with exams and on the cusp of school holidays and what have you. And just a reminder too that this will be up on our Tūturu YouTube and on the website in the next day or so, as well as if there are any further questions or comments that you'd like to send through, you can get in touch with us via the website at tuturu.org.nz or email us directly at admin@tuturu.org.nz. So once again, thank you very much for joining us, joining the Tūturu team here on this Thursday afternoon. I hope you have a lovely rest of your evening, and until next time, ka kite. Ngā mihi.